Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming and braving the snow a little bit to be here with us. My name is Isabella, and I'm a senior here, concentrating in political science and history. I'm originally from Seattle, which is kind of why we're all here today. Last summer, I started working in Seattle for a company rooted in rights, which Jordan, the director of this film, is the creative director for. And Rooted in Rights is a disability-related production company that makes videos and does social media campaigns around disability justice issues. So before last summer, I really had no idea that hundreds of thousands of people were working in sub-minimum wage conditions and in segregated working environments. And after watching that film, I knew immediately that it was an issue that we needed to talk about at Brown. And I'm so glad that Seas was able to make that happen with the 2018 Seaman Lecture. So the issues of people with disabilities, especially those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, rarely get space in places like this, in academia, to have their issues talked about. And so that's really why it's important that we're all here today, to amplify those voices and learn about issues that rarely touch our everyday lives, unless we're living them, but are incredibly important. So yeah, thank you to Dean X and John Corey and all the Seas folks for allowing us to be here. And thanks to Jordan for coming, making the trek from Seattle, and enjoying the snow. So if you want to come down, Jordan, and introduce the film, we'll get started. And then after the film, which is about an hour long, we'll have a panel with different community members talking about how the issue affects Providence and our local community.
Thank you, Isabella. I forgot you were going to have me do this. That's why I was standing up at the back. Sorry. So I'll be very brief because I know we're going to chat a bit after the film. I am the program director at Rooted in Rights, the Seattle-based disability rights video and social media advocacy organization that Isabella did some great work for us last summer. Our bread and butter is usually 3 to 5 minute social videos. We've made about 200 of them over the last couple of years on everything from get out and vote to institutions to this issue, which is sub-minimum wage. We pride ourselves on listening to the community around the country about which issues are really important to them. And if you know anything about the world of disability rights, you know there's about 10 million issues that need to be talked about that don't get enough airtime. So it's hard to decide which ones to pick and which ones not to. But as we learned about shelter workshops and sub-minimum wage and employment integration generally, we felt like it wasn't something that could fit into a 2-minute video, as good as we are at that. And we thought this would be the perfect opportunity to try something new, this is our first feature-length documentary. So I know we're going to get into it later, like I said, so I'll be quiet now. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy the film.
Well, thank you everyone for coming and for enjoying the film. I'm John Corey. I work for Catherine in Student and Employee Accessibility Services, and this is our 2018 Seaman Lecture, and it's a little bit different. Usually we have like a speaker who is doing some kind of research, and then they have their books for sale and that sort of thing. In this case, we've got a documentary, and we've got this great panel, which we're excited to share with you. And so I wanted to start out the panel section here with just allowing just the members of the panel to introduce themselves very quickly, and then we'll get into some questions. And then what we also have here is a really cool microphone that everybody enjoys, where we can kind of pass it around, and it's pretty much safe if you drop it or something like that. And then when you have a question, you can just talk into the disc at the top, and it will put your voice out into the public address system. So if you have a question, you can just kind of raise your hand, and we can hand that that little cube to you, and it's very easy to use, and you can just talk into it. So to get us started, maybe Jordan, just you've already introduced yourself a little bit, but just maybe a tad about yourself, and then we'll just kind of go down the panel here.
I don't think I have too much more to add. You heard from me at the beginning. I'm program director at Rooted in Rights and directed this film.
My name is Jerry. I'm associated with APSA.
My name is Key O'Donnell. I work for a provider known as the Fogarty Center as a vocational coordinator, and I'm co-president of the Rhode Island APSE chapter that Jerry mentioned.
Good evening, I'm Vicki Ferrara. I work at the Sherlock Center on Disabilities, and our focus has been promoting people's involvement in community work and just being members of their community and also education for the past 20-something years.
Good evening, I'm Rory Carmody. I work for Access Point, Rhode Island, and I chair the Governor's Commission on Disabilities. I primarily do employment for folks with differing abilities.
Great, thank you so much. We hope that you enjoyed the documentary film, and hopefully it's been inspiring you to think about some things related to this topic. But kind of to get us started, I was hoping, Jerry, that you could just kind of give us a little bit of background on your kind of your experience as a working person.
All right. So first of all, good evening. As you know, I am currently working for Dr. Daycare as a kitchen assistant, but I think about for 4 years. But before I get into that, it wasn't always like that. So rewinding back to 08, which I was a high school graduate, so a guy looking for work, and so with the declining economy, there were no places that would hire me. So I turned to the Rhode Island Human Services, and they hooked me up with Goodwill Industries, and they gave me some job trials, which one of them did not work out for me because they some of the places just didn't have the time or effort to give me the proper training I needed. So once my trials were done, I went back to Human Services, and now just shortly after my 21st birthday, they referred me to the Fogarty Center, which would help people like myself to look for work. So they housed me, and they housed me there, which was basically like a sheltered workshop. Because I kind of figured, this was the final stop. They had nothing else. They had nothing else to me, and as I learned shortly, find out that it was more than a sheltered workshop. It was for people who wanted to look for work. So for a couple of years doing piecework, I finally got an opportunity to do. I got a job offer at a daycare, which was known as Pawtucket Day at the time. So we're about 2 years after I started working there. The daycare was being bought out, so I didn't know what my future was gonna be, and so with hard work, they decided that they decided to keep me. So I've been there. I've been there ever since. I just had my four year anniversary. So within time outside of work, I became an advocate for people with disabilities. If you all know that with RIFTA, they wanted to eliminate the bus passes, like, and make people pay to ride. And I spoke out against that, as well as a few individuals. So with hard work, we were after 6 months of paying this 50-cent fare with the buses, we were able to stop it. So which contributed to my work, because I rely on public transportation to get to my destinations, and work's one of them. So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So, Jordan, from your introduction, you talked about the different kinds of films that you had done previously, and then you decided to do this more feature-length thing. But why this topic? Why this topic for the feature-length?
Well, it's a massive issue, and it's quite complicated. And there's the film split into 9 chapters. It probably could have been 27 chapters or 35 chapters in terms of all the different things that we could touch on. And in fact, your story reminds me that in Ohio, so Pam is the woman I interviewed in Ohio, and she ended up, with the help of Disability Rights Ohio, Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, and National Federation of the Blind, successfully getting her wages up to the minimum wage at the place where she was working, and everybody there now makes minimum wage. And her 2 co-plaintiffs, I did talk to one of them, although he doesn't appear in the film, and he was talking about how where he used to live, he was a telemarketer and got paid a wage just like everybody else. He had to move back to Tiffin to be with family, and when he moved back there, he's blind, and he had no access to public transit. So the sheltered workshop would hire him and pick him up in the morning and bring him home at night, and so that became his only option. And so something like transportation and access to public transportation is we're going to make a whole other film probably about how that affects employment and everything else. So that's just an example of how complex this is. And so the reason for a longer film primarily was that. The other reason was we wanted to have stories from all over the country that we could make available to advocates anywhere in the country. So if they wanted to talk about this in Mississippi, or they want to talk about this in the Northwest or the Southwest or wherever, they would have a story that people could hopefully relate to, because there are different ways of addressing this in different parts of the country. And I was, the best example of this is I was at a screening for the National Council on Disability in Louisville a few months ago. This is the council that advises the president and the Congress on disability rights issues. And we did a screening, and I was on a panel with a woman from the Heritage Foundation, which is a notable conservative foundation. I was a little worried about maybe what would she be saying. It's not, raising the minimum wage is not popular on a certain side of the aisle. But what she was really gravitating towards, and the reason she was there, it turns out, was she was a very big fan of entrepreneurship and providing business loans for business owners with disabilities, which is not something the film really focuses on too much, but it was an example of another tool in the toolbox for achieving equality in employment. And there are different solutions that appeal to different people in different parts of the country, and they should all be on the table. And so trying to make a film that brought in as many of those ideas as possible was really important.
Thank you, Jordan, for that. Vicki and Rory, if I understand it, you've got some background in understanding kind of that transition in the state of Rhode Island from sheltered workshops into more individualized employment, if I understand correctly. So either one of you, if you want to kind of just describe some of the changes you've seen in Rhode Island in this area, in your experience.
I can give some data. The Sherlock Center, several years back, started to collect with the Division of Developmental Disabilities and the agencies outcome data, because what we know is once you have information, you can look at it and you can make decisions. And we thought that if we could.
Turn the microphone a little bit closer to you.
Oh, okay. So anyway, the information would help focus on quality of services and help us to have continuous improvement. Back in, I'm just going to do a comparison from 2012 to the end of 2017. And our facility-based work, which would be sheltered workshop, back in 2012 had 839 people within the workshops. Today, there are 78 people at the end of December that are in a sheltered workshop. So in Rhode Island, our trends of moving people to be engaged in community activity has significantly changed, especially related to sheltered work. When we look at people doing what we call individual community-based employment, so people having a job, getting paid, and a minimum wage or better, we have in 2012, there are only 383 people working in community-based employment. And at the end of December, we had 834 people working in community integrated employment. And how does that shift happen? Well, the shift happens with the focus of expectation. The shift happens with the focus of resources. The shift happens when you have trained individuals supporting people. So those are some things that came into place. In Rhode Island, we had a significant shift because the Department of Justice came into our state under the Olmstead Act, and they came into an agreement with the state of Rhode Island that we needed to shift from segregated services to community-based services. And that consent decree outlines a roadmap, really, of strategies known to support community integration and community employment. And so the state right now is working towards aligning its resources, its training, and putting the pieces together to focus on employment. I think one of the gaps in our conversation, and we alluded to it in the film, there are lots of myths and facts about people with developmental disabilities, and there's lots of employers don't always have the awareness of the capabilities that people have. So I think a focus of our work is to engage employers to see the capacities of individuals. The word disability often gives us our own image of what that is, and as you saw in the movie, which I thought did a nice job showing different types of individuals and the skills and capacities they have, is that the job is a fit with the individual. It's not the disability, it's the skills and the abilities that the individual has. And I think that's the focus where we're moving today.
And Rory, what are your experiences in this area and things you'd like to highlight?
I think one of the interesting things with the Department of Justice consent decree is it came at a time when we were experiencing the highest unemployment rate in the country, I think second only to Mississippi. We were in the midst of a direct staff professionals crisis. There is probably a 30 to 40% turnover in most agencies around direct support staff, people who are actually doing the work. The entry-level wages for direct support staff are just a little above $10 an hour, maybe $10.36. And a lot of people we're supporting in community employment, the individuals they're supporting are making more money than they are. It's a system that's a little bit out of balance. We're experiencing unprecedented budget cuts in state services. We're told there might be another $18 million budget cut to services in the state of Rhode Island for people with disabilities. So we're at a very critical time. And it is called upon us more than ever to really be able to advocate for the people we support and to advocate for the people we employ to support those people that need them the most. So it's really caused providers to move out of that kind of passive, we do the work behind these doors role to where we have to get out and not only educate our legislators, but educate our communities, our families, and most of all, the business community to have them open those doors to us. In the consent decree was very clear about the schools who needed to do a better job, the providers who needed to do a better job, the legislators who needed to do a better job, but they forgot to include the employers who are integral if we're going to be successful in that. And if we look at changing administrations, the ADA is under attack in Washington today. And if we lose central tenets of the ADA, we lose everything. Everything from the employees' rights to protest or to ask for an accommodation. And if you look at just schools, the ability of sexual assault victims not to have to testify in an open forum, everything about the ADA and services that are important to people with disabilities is under attack today, and we must advocate for changes to that and protections of that, and we must work together with cross-disability coalitions, with groups, but most of all with our community, because it is a critical time for everyone who cares about people with disabilities, who works for people with disabilities, or who are a person with a disability to get out, and to start to advocate.
Thank you for that. That's a strong message. Thank you. Key, what are some of the things that you're seeing in the area of work that you do in terms of helping people with employment and challenges?
Well, I'd actually just want to continue on Rory's point that she raised about the need for advocacy, because I truly view this as much a workforce development issue in focus as much as it is a civil rights issue. Whereas years ago, our family members and neighbors were provided the opportunity to not live in institutions and be our neighbors to the left and to the right of us in the neighborhoods we live in. And unfortunately, the argument then was being made that they can't be. And now, I think in 2018, unfortunately, the argument is being made that they cannot be contributing members of the community. Where truly, and as we heard, as your film really illustrates, Jordan, people take pride in not just having a job or having that paycheck, but their contributions in society, which can include taxes. So there's the benefit of taking people off of such, state and federal dependency and actually contributing to the system. In regards to economic stimulus, a lot of times the money that people might be making at their jobs is spent in their communities, helping the economy flourish. And to get back to at core of how we can help inform our legislators of that is to really show them that impact. And that people with disabilities, and as your film also illustrates, it's not charity. There's benefit to business when they do find the right talent that they need that's supported properly. And I think that especially in voting years and seasons, they should be seen as constituents as well, because ultimately they want to belong, as we all do. And I find that work is most certainly one of those aspects. In the quote unquote work that I do, I had the benefit of being raised by a very strong mom who had this as quote unquote work as well. So she was an advocate for a ARC, one of the former chapters in the state. And so my experience in workshops was going in there in the days before daycare, having family members with disabilities. That also helped open up my eyes to really what potential and strengths and contributions they can have. And then continually to have friends with disabilities keeps my finger to the pulse to make sure that we are trying to champion for the things that truly do matter. And again, this isn't just for people with disabilities. Ultimately, this is for a better community that we can all partake in.
It sounds like everyone's very aware of the kind of challenges in terms of funding and in the legal background, in terms of challenges to the ADA itself. I'm curious about what you're seeing in terms of lobbying efforts, activism. It seems like it's a time to get off the couches, so to speak. I'm curious what you all see about about how to step up to this.
Can I just continue and then pass it? So at Rhode Island APSI, or the Association of People Supporting Employment First, we really want the message to be in your face. And when we say you, we mean legislators. We mean people who make these policy decisions on how much direct support can be paid, what types of allocation we're looking at or set-asides federally speaking for opportunity. And so we do something called Take a Legislator to Work Day. So not only is a business that is progressively and using diverse hiring practices benefiting from someone in their workforce, but again, people are seen as contributors to their community and ultimately as constituents. So, and that's a cross-aisle issue, and really where you can get cross-aisle investment from. I know many times when we hear about spending programs and workforce investment, it's very much on one side of the aisle. But ultimately, again, to speak towards chiseling away at one's dependency on federal and state funding, it's a win-win for everybody, and something that I think we can all get behind.
And I think when you start talking about changing a sheltered work program, changing day programs, people start to listen. When we put a sign in front of our sheltered work program that said for sale and we are moving, parents started calling, well, you can't just, where are they going to go? What's going to happen? Those extreme actions cause a reaction. And I think that's what we need, is to cause that reaction for people so people can start to create what their future is going to be for their sons, for their daughters, for themselves. Last week I was at the State House to testify on a DLT budget, and I was surprised when I got up there that I was in line with about 800 people also there to testify on gun rights. So you have to get people impassioned about what's important, and there can be nothing really more important than protecting the rights of people with disabilities and the opportunities for them to get out. So we're doing a lot around advocacy and training and getting people to come out to speak about those things. There's going to be a rally at the State House on the 29th where we're trying to get out to speak to legislators about the importance of this work, and that there is a group of constituent voting members who are saying to you, we will or will not vote for you based on how you treat our community. And it's really a time for that. It's funny because in the 40s and 50s, when parents were trying to keep their kids safe and not having to send them to the Ladd Center or Willowbrook or Danvers or some of those other institutions, they got together and they created the ARC agencies as a way to offset having to send their kids to the institutions. And they fought for public education. So in the 1970s, it took that long before the community said, yes, we should educate people with special needs. It's that advocacy that has to keep coming up again. And a lot of our parents are older. I have parents who are in their 80s and 90s who say, Rory, why do I have to do this again? What's going to happen to my 65-year-old son when this building goes away? And we need to educate the next group of parents coming up and the next group of kids coming out from schools who are much more savvy with technology and with social media. We have to harness that and really start to create a groundswell for people with disabilities. Not just folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but all disabilities. In any community, 20% identifies as a person having a disability. In Rhode Island, that's over 200,000 people. And if you tease that out to people who care about them, you're talking hundreds of thousands of people whose voices can really be brought to bear on this situation, this crisis really, in Rhode Island for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Thank you. Now, remember, if you have a question, just raise your hand, and Isabella can hand you the special cube microphone, and you can share your question with us.
Hi. That was a really great film. It was definitely really powerful, and I think it's a really important issue. I couldn't help but, in hearing everyone's stories, also think about the class and race dynamics. Like some of the speakers, some of the parents were speaking, like you could tell they were in like huge, expensive homes, and it seemed like they were the ones who were able to like kind of advocate for their children and kind of use their resources to make sure that their children were getting everything they needed. So I just wanted to see if like any of you wanted to comment on like the class-based and like race-based conversation or issues that are also connected to this sub-minimum wage issue.
I want to jump right on that. I guess as our great and late H.P. Lovecraft once said, I am Providence. And, living 18 beautiful years in the big city of dreams here, it opens up your eyes to exactly that. And take the disability aside, is not workforce development treated differently in urban areas as it is in possibly rural areas, or where we can see, whether it's in the film or sometimes right in front of our eyes and day to day, the advantages that some people have. Being a Special Olympian coach / integrated athlete, I've also kind of put it like this. It's apparent when the teams are playing from the city versus kind of the teams who might have a little bit more. You look and you see, the team from the city, the team from we'll just call the suburbs, has mom, dad, aunt, uncle. They're all wearing team colors. They've all got their banners up there, and they're all rooting for that one person there. And then you look, and maybe you've got a couple dedicated staff from the other agency that you might see in an urban setting. I think that's the same way with workforce development, and very much the opportunities that folks may have. So to your observation, I think that really that's where vocational rehabilitation can come into play and really bridge some of those fiscal barriers when it comes, especially towards that awesome story we saw of the young man at the bookstore. Because seeing is believing, and I recently just worked on a project with a filmmaker called Dan Habib called Intelligent Lives, and it really is about illustrating that struggle to success story. And I think Jordan's piece does that really well, because families especially want to see and believe it, but it's hard to just see the end result and not believe that this can happen, especially knowing the realities and limitations that you may have as a family. So, did I answer your question direct enough, or do you want some maybe some more hard examples of how I think we can better move the needle for economic opportunity for people who might not have that growing up?
I'd also, if anyone else is interested in engaging with the question. Yeah.
Sure.
I think there's absolutely a prejudice and a class struggle, for people with disabilities, as there are in all sorts of different minority types of communities. It just is. You can't deny that, or what's the expression? You put lipstick on a pig, still a pig. It's there. But I do think if you can, again, harness that collective energy, so people with money who have kids with disabilities have as much skin in the game as poor people who don't have money. It's still, what you're looking for is a better outcome for that person with a disability, regardless of their social structure. And maybe you can get something better for everybody that way. But I agree. I think you're absolutely right. There's certainly a classness to it.
The thing about disability, it affects all demographics. Pick a demographic, there's disability woven into that. If you are disabled, you're more likely to be poor, right? And many of the safety net systems that are in place often lead people to lean towards staying poor. So if I earn money, the conversation is often, well, if I earn money, then I'm going to lose my entitlement programs of some sort. There are some resources in place to help educate people on how to use work incentives so that they can earn money. There's now the ABLE Act, which allows people to put money into an ABLE account and use it for health care, for housing, for education, for other things that help a person live. And so if money's in an ABLE account, it's not used for that poverty standard. So if I'm an SSI recipient, I can't have more than $2,000 in the bank. If I have an ABLE account, I can have up to $100,000 in an account. So there are some things put in place right now that's, I think, trying to equalize, allowing people who have a disability to start to earn some assets, so that they can use it to improve their quality of life.
Is that ABLE account a state type program or a federal type program?
It's a federal type program that's operated in states, and the Treasurer's Office has established a mechanism for people to use the ABLE account here in Rhode Island. And it's starting to be used a little bit more frequently.
So that sounds like a tool to help people kind of break out of the confines of the way the system has been.
Yep. The other issue is, many people with disabilities use health care. They're on Medicaid or Medicare. And oftentimes people say, well, I'd like to go to work, but I need my health insurance. There are now rules in place that allow people to retain their Medicaid health insurance. And people can get work incentive benefits counseling to help them understand what work incentives exist so that they can make informed decisions about how earnings will impact their health insurance as well as their financial well-being. So there are some resources out there to help people make those decisions.
So it sounds like there's a little good news in there. That's something that's a bit of an improvement.
One thing Rory said, we've got people, parents, and we have kids coming out of school. The expectations that parents today have are different than parents 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago had. And so people are coming out of high school with the expectation that they're going to be integrated in their community. They're going to have employment. So that's a shift. And so now the adult support side is having to realign itself to support that expectation. You know, the research says kids who have multiple experiences, who have paid employment as a youth, are more likely to have paid employment as adults. And our system in Rhode Island now is kids are graduating having experiences so that they're able to make informed choice. And they're saying, I have skills, I can do more. So that's an exciting part of what I see is going to influence the future.
Before you move on, I just want to make a little bit of space for Joshua's other part of the question, which is about race. I think that often in conversations, it's easy to talk about class because it so directly fits this issue. But I think that we saw highlighted when we looked at the stories of Tillman and other folks in Mississippi who were Black folks working in really destitute areas. The film does uplift that issue, but I think it doesn't necessarily always expressly name that, which is something that Jordan and I have talked about before. Because someone said earlier, if you are disabled, you're also likely poor. But there are also so many people of color who are disabled and have their identities compounded, and that obviously really clearly affects the access of support that they're given to continuously. So Jordan, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, and it'd be great if you could talk about your observations and your experiences and how the folks that you talk to who were people of color, how their experiences were made even more difficult by their racial identities.
Sure, and I'm glad we're steering it back to that because, yeah, class is the obvious one to talk about here with money, but so almost everyone I interviewed in the film, I asked that question to. How does someone's background, whether it be race or something else, affect their chances of being shuttled into that? And one of the reasons it's not in the movie is almost nobody had a good answer. And one of the reasons for that is, and I could be wrong about this, but there's not a whole lot of studies on this. No one is looking at this with any kind of eagle eye, period, let alone one that breaks it down in a way that would be useful. I would be shocked if people of other marginalized backgrounds were not shuttled into the system more often than your average white suburban kid. So my attempt to show that, or at least try to explore that, was in some ways some of the reasons I went to some of the places in the country that I went. And to give you another example, whenever we do documentaries like this, and this is true in disability and other things that I've done in the past, a lot of times the way I find people is I reach out to nonprofits or service organizations that work with whatever population that is. And a lot of the people who work there, they're busy, they don't have a lot to do. They want to give me somebody very easily. They use their poster children, the people who appear on their brochures. Those people tend to be white. And so there usually has to be a couple follow-up conversations where I'm like, I think this person's great, it's a wonderful story. Is there anyone else I can talk to? And sometimes I have to be very explicit about what I mean by that. And that's how you get to different stories. And so we purposely went to Mississippi and we purposely went to New Mexico to seek out stories that I could not get in Seattle or I couldn't get in New Hampshire in order to try to talk to people about that. But even people in that position, that wasn't something that they focused on, at least in their own experiences. But the point of Chapter 4, and Isabella, I think this is where we had our conversation, the point of Chapter 4 is to show if you are living with low economic means in a trailer outside Vicksburg, Mississippi, you are much more likely to be shuttled into the sheltered workshop system than if you live in a beautiful house in New Hampshire like Sarah is, despite how many barriers you might face in both of those situations. The one thing I do want to say, though, when we do talk about this, is there's a temptation to say people in these situations, there's nothing they can turn to, there's nothing good going on there, and that's not exactly true. In Trust Jones' case, Trust lives about 60 miles from Tillman in Mississippi. He went to a public school. The difference there is that in his public school, there's a 18 through 21 program. And in that 18 through 21 program, they essentially speed date jobs in the community. And they go around to different jobs to see what they're like and network with employers. not for 20 years, for like a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And so by the time they get into wanting their first job, they have a lot of those connections. So a person like Trust, interned at a local state representative's office and like did paperwork for him for a little while. Then he had another one, I believe, at the library. I'm kind of not remembering all that well, before he ended up at the car dealership. So where there's programs like that, where they can be applied, especially in public schools, that is another way that we can level this out a little bit. And so it's not always dependent upon the mom or dad who maybe doesn't even have a job, who just has time to go and read about all this stuff and figure it out and call up and be willing to advocate and know people's rights. It's not entirely dependent upon that. For people who have to go to work, or people who have 4 or 5 kids, or people who have not that much money coming in and working 2 jobs, it can't be all on them to figure it out. It's got to be some of these other institutions out there, schools being the number one.
I'm gonna ask one more question. So I would love it if you spoke a little bit to the challenges in New Mexico, because I know that disability rights center works really differently than a lot of the other ones throughout the country, and that's specifically because it caters to Native American folks. And I think that's a story that also should be talked about a little bit.
So I'm going to be 100% honest that I only know part of the story. So the Native American Disability Law Center and Disability Rights Washington, which is where my program is based, they're both what are called protection and advocacy agencies. There's one in every U.S. state and territory. They're federally mandated, federally funded to advocate on behalf of people with disabilities. The Native American Disability Law Center, I had not worked with them previously, and as I've learned about them, I believe that the Native American tribes did not get P&As until a couple decades after the states did, and that there's a bunch of weird rules about how they're able to set up. They need to have, I think, 2 contiguous areas or something. There's in some minimum amount of people. I can't remember exactly how it works, but yeah, it's not every Native American in this country has access to a P&A because of this. The one in New Mexico is the largest because the Navajo Nation is so large, and so they're able to have a much more elaborate setup. They have a couple of offices. Their main one, I believe, is in Albuquerque, but the one I worked with was in Gallup. Anyway, this is all to say that when we get to issues of employment for people with disabilities who live on or near the Navajo lands, a lot of those folks are facing upwards of 50% unemployment for non-disabled people. And so there are issues of dramatic unemployment and poverty and everything else that comes with that they're up against in addition to some of these things. And so there's a temptation there to say, we don't have a lot of resources, but here's a group home where my disabled child can go live. Or here's a sheltered workshop where they can go all day and work. It doesn't even matter that they make pennies per hour because I have nowhere else for them to go. And so all those things are working against people in those situations that wouldn't be elsewhere necessarily.
When we saw in the video, I wanted to see if anyone knew what the people with disabilities can pay for their medical things if they have minimum wage money and they don't have any money to pay for their medical insurance. Does anyone have any issues about that?
In terms of the people in the film having health insurance?
No, they have medical insurance and they can't, and then the money to be paid for the medical insurance. And if they have medical problems, how they put the pay for it if they have minimum wage in their jobs.
Right. So in terms of people in the film, I can give you a little bit of details on that, and then you guys should probably talk about that because that's a big issue when we talk about this. Some of the people in the film have full-time jobs, and so they have benefits, and so they have health insurance. Others are using Medicaid, but they don't earn enough in order to disqualify for Medicaid, at least for health insurance purposes. And for others, I honestly don't know. But access to medical benefits is, of course, an important thing, and so I think some folks here should probably talk about that.
I can address that here in Rhode Island. If somebody's on SSI, Supplemental Security Income, they get Medicaid. Somebody can make a little over $30,000 a year and still retain their Medicaid. In the state of Rhode Island, we also have what's known as the Medicaid buy-in program, and it's known as the Sherlock plan. And that plan allows somebody to, on a sliding fee scale, purchase Medicaid. Some people with disabilities, a traditional health insurance plan does not cover the support needs that somebody might need to live independently or to live in the least restrictive environment. So that Medicaid health insurance is able to cover personal care attendants, is able to cover long-term care supports that can provide direct support professionals to support them in community living. So that is a question that people have when they are going back to work is, how am I going to keep, I need these services so that I can continue to live independently. And in Rhode Island, I can say that there are resources to help a person retain their Medicaid if they need it.
And this must vary a lot state by state, where if you are lucky enough to live in the right place, then maybe you have some of these resources
And
somewhere else.
Many states do have a Medicaid buy-in program, but each state's program is different, right?
Which makes it really fun to move for a new job because you don't even know if you
yeah.
can keep your benefits.
Yeah,
So
you have to do your research, right, and make those informed decisions.
But in Rhode Island, under the Sherlock plan, you can have about $10,000 in a savings account, $20,000 if you're a married couple, which again is much better than the $2,000 limit that's in place now. And usually premiums aren't in excess of $90, $95 a month. So it's a very affordable option for people going to work. So they can retain some income, they can retain the medical benefits as well, and they then put some money in the bank too. So it helps people move out of poverty as well.
And you piggyback that with the ABLE
Yeah,
Act.
you can build
The
something.
ABLE account, it is helping raise the bar on people's financial stability.
Just like with expectations, the earlier that you can have that conversation, the better off that you'll be. Because waiting for myths to build up and then kind of put up a wall in between us and opportunity is never a good thing. But the more that you can have the conversation, get a little information, school yourself a little bit on it, the better off that you'll be.
Jerry, what do you like about being a working person? What do you, I mean, we all get some satisfaction out of the jobs we do and get paid and things like that. What do you think about in terms of being a working person?
Well, to put it into truth, before I started working a couple of years ago, I was sitting in my room doing nothing because I thought once I graduated high school, this was going back during my junior high days. I thought I could rely on my father to buy stuff that I want, and originally I thought getting it, and I originally thought getting a job would be easy. Like I thought with a snap of a finger that if you go and get an application to do get a job, they'll hire you right away. And of course that wasn't the case. So if if you're doing the same thing over and over every day, doing nothing, that's gonna get boring, and you're not socializing. And so when you're working, it's not just about it's just not about making money. You can establish new relationships with different people, and communicate and keep busy. Like I feel like if you really want something in life, then you need to work hard for it without any limits. You can't expect handouts or free stuff, because nothing is free in life. Originally I thought I couldn't there was no way I could hold down a job. I originally thought, okay, maybe this is gonna last a few months, because as you know, I am a disabled person, but I don't like to use that term. I have I feel like if if people know that I'm disabled, I'm gonna get picked on, and that's pretty much a major issue in the state. People will look below us, thinking that we're easy targets, and that's not the case. There are people out there such as myself that have disabilities that are smart, that are smart, and I never thought in high school, I never thought I could make the honor roll because my ability is limited. Like I thought, high school was gonna be hard. I'm not gonna get through. I'm gonna rely on help. But I was able to go to classes independently and get some jobs and work in a small cafe. That's pretty much where I got all my work training from. So that was like a major help. So.
Can you share some of the cool stuff you're able to do now that you're earning a good paycheck for yourself that before you couldn't?
Well, yeah. Before I get to that, so as you know, when I was working in a shelter workshop, I would say it was kind of a low. I didn't see it as a low. I mean, I kind of knew it wasn't for me because I've had. I mean, as you know, like when disabled people with disabilities graduate, they go to shelter workshops, but that wasn't the case for me. I did go out and have a job before I went into a workshop, but this was before I knew that shelter workshops existed. I did not know about that. So so when I was doing that piecework, my first check was like, I don't know, like about $10, and I initially thought, I could be making I can make huge amounts of money, and that wasn't the case. And when I looked at my first paycheck, I'm like, this is not the money I was hoping for. I felt I was worth more than that. So I heard stories from the staff that there are people that have been there longer than I have, and I thought, I'm gonna be one of those people stuck in a workshop for the rest of my life, because I thought that was the end. I thought that was the end of the road for me. So fast forwarding, thanks to the support of my organization, I was able to get a job, and I was able to get more money, and now I can do the stuff that I wasn't able to do before. I can go I can go to the movies. I can eat out, and once every year I attend Comic-Con and meet all these celebrities that I grew up watching. So when I look at that, it just shows how much my hard work paid off. Because if it wasn't for that, then I wouldn't be able to do these things.
Paycheck and Comic-Con, life's good.
Yeah, pretty much.
Jerry, what's your favorite thing about your job that you have right now?
Well, I feel like if I have a job, it doesn't make me feel below. I mean, it makes me feel normal. I can be treated as a person that I can show people not to underestimate me in my disability, because there are ways I can overcome it.
Just one more quick question for Jordan. I'm hoping you have a distribution plan for your film. This would be valuable all over the country in a wide variety of audiences.
I'm so glad you asked that question. So our strategy really depends upon screenings like this. University screenings, community screenings. You are actually one of almost 300 that we've had around the country. I've been to almost none of them because there have been organizations and individuals like you all who have put them on using the film. And we've been in, I think, 40 different states at this point over the last year or so. And I really encourage you all to do the exact same thing. And in fact, if I could ask everyone in this room an easy question, how many people here have at least one friend? One? At least one? Okay, unanimously, everyone has one friend. If you invite that friend over and you download this movie and you watch it together, you've just held a screening. The problem with this issue is so few people know about it, let alone trying to advocate for it. So we need to get the word out there to all these different states because it does matter, it does change. I'm so happy to report the film is now wrong. Alaska just outlawed subminimum wage like 2 weeks ago. So now we're down. Seattle, where I live, outlawed subminimum wage. So this can happen. Maryland is ending it in 2020. New Hampshire already did. So it can change, but it absolutely has to come from people in those states, and they can't do it unless they know about it. So that's up to you. I know we're at a college. You guys are probably from all over. Take the film home. You can find it at bottomdollarsmovie.com. I didn't see anybody write that down, so I'll say it again, bottomdollarsmovie.com. And that is where you can find all the information about the film. You can sign up for a screening when you do that, which is totally free. You get a bunch of different resources that can help you plan the screening. And then there's a link over to Vimeo where you could rent it or buy it. It's $3 to rent. And please show it to everyone you possibly can.
And just a fun fact, right after we had a Seattle screening, the city chose to outlaw subminimum wage like a month later, so.
Hello. Okay, so this question is to Jerry because you've been talking a lot about your work experience, and I also wanted to know more about actually your advocacy work and how you got involved with that and what you did in order to have that success with the RIPTA issue, and if there are any issues that you're working on advocating for right now.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, my advocacy started when I found out that RIPTA was gonna end the disability free pass. Well, not end it. They were gonna charge the seniors and disabled a 50 cent fee. So I first brought it up to Key, and
I said I don't know anything about it. He was the expert and still is.
so I told him, there's a nonprofit organization called the RIPTA's Writers Alliance, and I told him that I'm gonna go rally with them, and he just told me, well, if you're gonna go do that, don't get the people in poverty involved, and I'm just gonna speak on how I feel about it and how people such as myself felt about it. So now, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So not only that, I have a disability. I'm an SSI recipient. So I rely on that to pay my rent, and of course working comes at a cost. Now that I'm making money, half of my SSI is being deducted because I'm making money. So in order to make up the difference, I have to give half my pay. I have to give one of my like at least two of my paychecks to my dad to my father because he manages my my Social Security, so that pays up my rent. So I have at least like only at least about 200 about 200 to spend on my money. So I have the budget that carefully because at the time I used to get paid every other week. So so that didn't really help. So I had to make my money last. And when they brought the 50-cent bill, I'm like, you know, there's no way I'm gonna be able to keep up with this. I need to save my money. I need to save my money, and I'm gonna have to rely on my paycheck just to get to work, because I have to take two buses to get to where I need to go. So when you think 50 cents, you may think it's just like, it may seem low, but not when you're taking the bus like four times a day and five days a week. Mm-hmm. So I protest, and I'm saying well, I can handle it, but there's not many individuals such as myself that like me that can't make change. And I have some people in that organization or make less money than I do, and I'm like, you know, how are they gonna get around, or if they're stranded somewhere, are they gonna deny them a ride? So I turned to that. I used that as my power. So fast forwarding to last year, they were going to go through the 50 cents. So after it literally took us like 6 months to tell Rita that this program isn't working. So that's pretty much where all my advocacy started, was fighting with their pass fare.
Thank you.
And when it comes to transportation, it's not RIPTA. It's our legislature allocates certain amount of resources for public transportation, and they usually match it with some federal dollars. So if we want transportation to change in Rhode Island, it's not advocating with RIPTA, it's advocating with our legislators so that more resources are put into public transportation. It's a very limited system, and it really does limit opportunities for people.
And one that might possibly be at risk again in a couple months. So, Jerry, it's not like advocacy is one and done. You advocate once and then you're able to sit back on the sofa. It seems like that's a fight that you have to keep fighting.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, even though it's even though it's still now, it's not a guarantee that it's gonna happen again. So you know, and yeah, I mean, you gotta be. I'm always gonna be prepared to fight it again if I have to, even if it means like I'm gonna hold out a sign saying that RIPTA is ripping the disabled off. So I mean, as of right now, like where the bill stands, like there's only. They only put enough money in for this for the fair the no fair program to last for like 2 years. So for next year we need to look at we need to look at our options to make sure that that the state's going to be able to provide for the disabled once again. Once again, because we've already seen what it's already done. It's already done once, and we do not need to see this happen again, because it was already a problem.
So what can we do, kind of to wrap up, what can we do to stay informed about these topics? Where can we, are there advocacy groups that we can, check in with or get on email lists to learn, when things are happening, to try to stay involved, to try to stay informed, so that for those of us here, we can stay connected with this and not have it for ourselves personally fade from our view? How can we stay connected with this?
So nationally, there's Key had mentioned the Association of Persons Supporting Employment First. That is very much focused on this issue. They have a position paper out, and they do national advocacy. And the local chapters are paying attention to that. Our local chapters, Key O'Donnell here, he's the co-president of the Rhode Island APSI chapter. So if you want to get connected to Rhode Island APSI, you can speak to Key. Jerry, myself, Aurora, we're all members, to help stay connected. Some of the Governor's Commission on Disabilities does a legislative letter. You can get on their listserv to stay informed of some of those issues. The Sherlock Center does have a listserv, and we put out some topical things every so often. Again, one of our focuses is supported employment, and we do benefits counseling. So there's some resources there. What other things would you add?
Gina Makris does a DD blog
the
on
DD blog, yeah.
Olmsted, and she's following the DOJ consent decree from its start to current, to hopefully it's finished in Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a link on, is a link on Sherlock on your website? But it's Gina Makris, M-A-C-R-I-S, and she does a DD Olmsted blog. She's a parent of a person, a young man with a disability, and was a former journalist, I think, with the Providence Journal. Yes. So she's got some great writing chops, and it's really giving a great chronicle of the DOJ situation in Rhode Island. Mm-hmm.
And if you want to learn more about any of these issues, you can go to rootedinrights.org. Our blog is an outlet for disabled writers from anywhere in the world. And if there's anybody out there with a disability who has a story to tell, you can actually submit ideas to the blog. We also have the Storyteller Series, which is very similar in that we have people, first-time filmmakers with disabilities, make films, and we release them online. That's open submissions right now. And then, of course, we try to cover every single issue we possibly can anywhere in the world. So if you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, you can get caught up on a lot of stuff that is going on. So that's Rooted in Rights. I really encourage you to check out a lot of the great videos that our team makes.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, panel.
Thank you for coming.
And we really appreciate you visiting with us. We have some refreshments for everyone out in the lobby. We hope that you join us for a while after after we finish here. We'll do our best to keep informed about this topic and active on this topic. So thank you very much. Yep.
Can I just put one plug in? We're doing filming or doing releases in October. We will be doing the Dan Habib film as a showing, and that is called Intelligent Lives. So if you want to stay informed about when that's happening, we'll be promoting that on the Sherlock Center's website.
Which actually features a local Providence resident, a recent immigrant from a Haitian community, and is someone that I think really knocks it out of the park and shows, I think, some of the diversity that we want to continually see as this. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, panelists. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it very much.
Oh.
Sure. We'll get that last question in.
I wanted to ask about motion dystrophy, if I have a disability today, about what I can do for my motion dystrophy, or muscle dystrophy, what I have. Does anyone have any question about that?
I didn't catch the beginning of that. I'm sorry.
I have motion dystrophy, and And I wanted to know if you guys have any questions what I can do for my disability.
If we have any,
Specifically related to, did you say muscular dystrophy?
Yes. Yes.
Like resources related to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there is the Muscular Dystrophy Association in Rhode Island. They might be able to offer you some information of networks you can partake in. The Governor's Commission on Disabilities also might have some reference material or people you could link with in the MD community. I know there are some support groups for folks who are living with muscular dystrophy as well.
Yeah, I have family related to my mom and my sister are, but my mom is most different than I am, but my mom is much medical than I am. The problem is I have medical in my hands, my feet, and my mouth and my hands have problems too.
So do those resources hopefully can point you in the right direction in terms of, and I think a lot of these things are available, like looking online.
I can add one more. If you're going down the road to work, there's a national resource called the Job Accommodation Network, and so they can help explore whatever your job functions are based on what your functionability is to do the job, and figure out what an accommodation might be to help you be more efficient or more independent in doing whatever piece of the job that you're having trouble with. So the Job Accommodation Network could be a resource for you.
Well, I'm still looking for a job right now, but I'm still looking, so I'm just working as best I can to find a job of my strengths are.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, panelists, and thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight. And please join us for some refreshments out in the lobby. Thank you so much.